Thank you all so much for joining us. I am joined, my name is Ellen Fitzgerald, Communications Lead for Dance Data Project, and I am joined today by Emma Lister and Zoe Ashe-Browne, continuing in part 2 of our discussion on dancer mental health and the culture around ballet. And so I will have the two of them reintroduce themselves, and as well as talk about the survey that they issued last fall on dancer mental health, and then we will kind of get into some of the things that they wanted to highlight about the survey and the data around that. So Emma, take it away.
So I'm a classically trained ballet dancer. I went away to school when I was quite young, when I was 9, and I graduated when I was 18 from the Royal Winnipeg Ballet. And then I moved to the UK pretty fast after I graduated, and for about 15 years, I freelanced. I worked with companies like English National Ballet, National Ballet of Ireland, English Youth Ballet. I did everything. I did corporate gigs. I danced at Buckingham Palace. I danced in a school gym. So I had a pretty broad range of experience as a classical ballet dancer living in London. And like a lot of dancers, as I got older, I transitioned towards being a rehearsal director. And I've worked with contemporary dancers, ballet dancers, circus performers. So again, a pretty broad range of experiences. And I run a small theater company called Makeshift Company, which during the pandemic turned into a podcast because nothing was happening in terms of theaters. So initially it was just an interview podcast called Movers, Shakers, Makers. And then I got a little bit of money from the Arts Council of England to do a mini series about ballet, specifically about what I felt needed to improve in ballet to kind of bring it into the 21st century. And one of those topics was mental health, which I collaborated with Zoe, and to get enough data that would represent the broader cohort of ballet dancers, because we didn't want to just talk about our experiences, though I'm sure we have many fascinating anecdotes to tell you. We just had our experiences in terms of mental health. And so we opened it up to, we initially just thought it would be like our friends and ex-colleagues with a survey that was about 30 questions about mental health through training and into professional life. But it went much, much wider. People just started sharing it on social media. And I think ultimately, more than 400 people filled out the survey. So yeah, we got quite a lot of data and stuff, which we're excited to share with you here. And then we made a podcast about it, essentially.
So I'm Zoe Ashe-Browne. I'm from Dublin, Ireland, and I'm a professional dancer and sort of emerging mid-career choreographer. So I'm primarily dancing on a full-time basis with Opera Ballet Flanders, which is in Antwerp, Belgium. But before that, I worked in Germany in a small company. I also worked with the English National Ballet in London. I worked with the National Ballet of Ireland. I freelanced for many years. And I'm very lucky to be able to still dance and make at the same time. So having those kind of two strands working in tandem is a really exciting thing for me at the moment. But I also teach, and teaching definitely inspires me to kind of get in contact with the psyche of the dancer, especially because I think you're always trying to do a little bit better for the next generation. I think it's a really natural impulse. And that was one of the pushes for me to speak to Emma about maybe doing a podcast episode dedicated to mental health and dance, like Emma said. And that was really the genesis of it. It was just us coming together during lockdown and trying to see if we could find kind of a solution-based conversation.
To kind of just jump right into it, one of the things that I think most people are familiar with in terms of mental health issues in ballet is body image and eating distress issues. So can you talk about the stats that you received from the survey related to that, specifically related to school and professional life, as well as kind of the specifics, and if there are any gender related specifics with those statistics as well?
I think it's important to say we did the survey and we did the podcast because we love ballet. I don't want to burn it down. I want to bring it into the 21st century. So having said that, there are some things that really suck about it. And one of the things, probably the most famous thing, if you talk to Joe Blow on the street, they'll probably ask you, do you have to watch what you eat as a ballet dancer? Because these issues are persistent. In terms of our survey, in school, 81% of survey takers in school had body image or eating distress issues, which is pretty, that's pretty dire, frankly. And in terms of the breakdown of gender, it probably wouldn't surprise you to know that in school, men, about 42% of men didn't suffer from anything, whereas only 14% of young women didn't suffer. I think it's also good to note that men might experience different pressures to do with body image. And certainly when I wrote the survey, I was writing it from a female perspective. So I was thinking of, the classic, the skinny ballerina perspective. I think boys and men have different issues. Sometimes, certainly they might feel pressure to drop weight, but they might also feel pressure to look big and strong and bulk up. So that's definitely something that I failed to notice in the survey, but it was brought up to me by one of the survey takers. And in terms of what the percentages were, I think 65% had extreme negative thoughts about their body. Over half the people were feeling guilty after eating. Over half were restricting calories. So, the age of the people we were surveying were people who graduated pre-1990 to people who graduated, in 2000 or 2019. So, 2020 or 2019. So these issues didn't really change throughout, because I could break it down and look at the ages. So this is obviously a persistent problem that we need to fix early on, so that, as Zoe will say now, it goes through into professional life as well.
I'm looking at the professional statistics from the survey. Emma was speaking about school, and obviously there is a little bit of deviation and fluctuation naturally in those statistics. So the one that really actually jumped out at me was that like eating distress and body image issues rose in men actually by 12% in professional life, and they went down only marginally under 10% for women. And I mean, you would wonder why that is. Maybe it's because the rigorous schedule for women in a company, you don't really have to think about your weight if you're cracking out 80 Swan Lake performances in a season. I know that's a bit extreme. But you're involved in 4 acts. The men are involved in 2, and then they go home and they have to think of their body in a different way. But it's also symbolic of the fact that body image issues, it's not, such a linear problem that you look in the mirror and you don't like what you see and you want to change it. There are so many different layers to this with mental illness and with the psyche and the perception of yourself, and how that continues to evolve as you evolve as a person. And if it isn't treated, it is going to manifest. It might be brought on by a stressor, it might be brought on by a role, it can be brought on by so many different things, a life transition, an unexpected injury. So it affects both genders. And it continues, like Emma said, into professional life, and it just changes in its dynamic. It doesn't necessarily go away as you become adult and grow up and grow out of it. It just changes form, I would say. There's another couple of interesting statistics. 3/4 of dancers picked one or more things from a drop-down list. So we had a drop-down list of, calorie restriction, purging, binging, extreme negative thoughts around body image. And, just for 75% of professional dancers to still be choosing one or more of these is a pretty worrying statistic.
Can you talk a little bit about what you learned related to self-worth and one's identity being tied to ballet and dance?
Ballet is has very rigid rules. And I'm saying ballet because our survey was very much based on our experiences as classical dancers, and I wanted to make the survey very precise. So we were only really talking about people who had been through classical ballet training. That's not a value statement on other dance forms, but I just thought we'd be able to understand the data better if we kept it pretty tight. So yeah, ballet has very rigid rules. So it's very easy to feel like you fail, because ballet doesn't really conform to individual dancers. You're expected to basically bend your body into it. So in school, we had 68% of people during their training had feelings of worthlessness, which it makes me really sad, actually, because in school, should be a golden time when you're just, absorbing knowledge. You could be dancing some amazing reps you might never get to do again. You should be being exposed to loads of different dance forms. It should be a really exciting, nourishing time. And 68% of people to be going through it at some point feeling worthless means that something's not working here. And I would say that by something not working, there could be some bad teaching practices going on here. Because though our survey was very much about mental health, I think that on reflection, it was also about the adverse effects on dancers' mental health from bad teaching practices and bad coaching practices in professional life. So this can carry on past school, as Zoe will talk about in professional life, but I just wanted to take a quick minute to talk about the 200 plus dancers who took our survey who didn't go on to a professional career for whatever reason. They left school and that was the end of their dance career. And the comment section before the survey went into the professional career bit, and for these people who didn't go through to the next phase, were very heartbreaking, actually. I think I shed a tear reading some of them, because there were body image issues that were going on through their adult life. There were panic attacks. There was a lot of anxiety, people mentioning, nightmares, and a general feeling that they had failed somehow because they hadn't gone on to, do Swan Lake on stage or whatever the dream was. And so I think that when we are talking about self-worth and we're talking about training, we need to make sure that we're caretaking for people who might go on to be ballet teachers, who might go on to be theater goers, who might put their children in ballet. Let's make sure that everyone feels they've achieved something going through their training, whether or not they end up doing 32 fouettes in Act 3 at Swan Lake.
So I'll jump in for the professional portion of the survey. So I said that 68% of students felt feelings of worthlessness throughout their training. And the statistic basically stayed the same. It was 67% in professional life. And that's really, really sad. And they are different people, because obviously a lot of people went on to do different things with their lives. And it's a real shame that legacy kind of carries through no matter what. So what Emma was saying about this idea that you failed, it really struck me as well, reading the comment section from people who hadn't gone on to get a professional education, a professional career, after professional training. It's such a shame. And I think it's because there is no real kind of, at the moment, I don't think, holistic education for professional ballet dancers in particular. I think your daily practice is tied to who you are as a person. And it's really hard to separate that as a young person. It's really hard to separate that as a professional, as an adult. And I think you feel as a person going in as a vulnerable human being trying to do your best, that if you are given the same chance as your colleagues, your counterparts, your classmates, you have the same classes, the same teachers, and then if you don't make it, then you have failed in some way. And it's just simply not the case. There are so many, like we know now, there are so many things that are out of your control that they don't tell you about, because it probably doesn't even occur to the teachers to tell you that, hey guys, even if it doesn't work out, you're not a failure. And when we talk about teaching practices, there's a lot of dodgy stuff going on. But again, we didn't want to point fingers at anyone. These are learned responses. This is conditioning. These are things that people have heard in their training, and they may not have seen the red flag in it, and they're carrying it through because maybe it worked for them. And so I think the thing that we want to address is, the language used, the practices used, the traditions. We hold on to tradition in ballet so much. And I think that it doesn't have to be such a scary conversation to look at how we're teaching students and adapt. It doesn't have to be, such a controversial thing, because like Emma says, it's completely necessary. We have to do something about these statistics.
I think something that a lot of dancers, ballet dancers in particular, have experienced is this idea that ballet is hard, and so it should be hard on you. Can you talk a little bit about what you experienced in the survey data related to it just being really hard on people?
I think that the previous question bleeds into this. Like Zoe said, and like you said, with the cyclical nature of teaching, you're passing the baton. I don't think that bad teaching practices are conscious necessarily. I think that that's just the way it is. And so that's how I teach. And interestingly, when I broke it down in ages in the survey, I could see that the older cohort reported fewer instances of verbal abuse, fewer instances of eating distress issues, fewer instances of sexually inappropriate behavior than the younger cohort. And in my head, that really surprised me because I would have thought things were improving. Particularly people who graduated in the last 5 years, I kind of erroneously presumed that they would be doing much better in terms of mental health and bad teaching practices. But I think what that might point to is that the older generation might not have seen anything wrong with what they were doing. And it is they who are now teaching the younger ones. So that also gives me hope. I think that when the millennials and Gen Z end up being the teachers and coaches, then we might see their values coming into their practice as well. In school, over half of students didn't feel they could voice their concerns. And that's not even like formal complaints to do with, some serious infringements on their rights. We're talking about just voicing concerns or questions in ballet class. So over half the people didn't feel like they could say anything. So this is a major issue, is that kind of silence. And one statistic that kept jumping out at me, one of the highest ones we got, was over 80% in school said that they'd experienced or witnessed verbal abuse. And we kind of, we define that as bad language, yelling in anger at students, or comments that made them feel uncomfortable or made them feel bad about themselves. So this is kind of permeating into young brains, that this is what you have to take. It's kind of normalizing both physical pain in ballet, sorry that it hurts sometimes, and also some mental anguish. And, to be a ballet dancer, you have to be disciplined, yes, but discipline can sometimes morph into this kind of devotion that can get quite twisted, and you think you have to just sacrifice everything to be a ballet dancer. So discipline, yes. Blind devotion, I would say probably not. Thank you very much.
I think that there's definitely also an anxiety within professional life, because when you're working in a company, especially a company that's definitely very performance driven and tour driven, and they really have a quota that they have to fulfill within the season, and you are an integral cog in that machine, be it in the corps de ballet or as a principal, then you have a certain amount of shows you need to do. Within those shows, you might get some opportunities. You don't want to be down for them. If you're doing core for 8 shows a week in the same spot, it's probably to give someone else an opportunity. And so you're really in this, organism of people, and you're really important in the functionality of that. And so there's a pressure to be consistent, and nobody wants to get labels. The problem is, when you're in a company, and I've seen this firsthand, that you can get a label really quickly of they're kind of unreliable. She gets injured a lot. That person's always a bit sick, and you don't want to get this label of being precious in any way. And so people will stop listening to their bodies. They'll stop listening to their brains when it's crying out for help, to say, I really, really need a break. Because what we ask of ourselves can be season to season. Sometimes it can be okay, but sometimes it can be ridiculous, really and truly. And because there is no culture of kind of taking a step back and stopping and just saying, I think I might need, a little bit of time out, that we just get used to this cycle of not listening to ourselves and taking it too far. So that's definitely something that I think we need to address with all ballet companies, dance companies, actually, I would say. In terms of statistics, with voicing concerns or questions, so this really is just like even in studio practice. With professional life, 40% of people still felt that they couldn't. It could be a myriad of different reasons. They don't want to undermine the stager or choreographer or ballet master, mistress in the studio. The director might be volatile. There could be so many different reasons why they still don't feel they have a voice, but it's concerning that it only improved by 10% from school to professional life. And then with the verbal abuse and bad language, again, this is a statistic that really spoke to us. In company life, it was 73% of people witnessed firsthand verbal abuse in the studio. The verbal abuse one for me is also quite interesting because we have this beautiful multicultural art form. And so we have different people from different places. And sometimes it can just be, you know, in your culture, you know, Irish people, we speak really loud. I'm currently monitoring my tone because I have a tendency to talk like this and it stretches. And like Emma's laughing because she knows that if I'm talking in the dressing room, the director is going to hear it in his dressing room, like all the way across the theater. So, you know, there are so many different, there's a kind of a nuance to the whole thing of I'm not trying to dilute verbal abuse at all as the statistic because it was really important, but it's also important to address that we're from different places and different people have different codes of conduct. And so all the more reason to maybe have a kind of a universal code of how we speak in a ballet studio, you know, I think would help everyone. And would help everyone to feel more comfortable if we all just had like a base level of what is appropriate.
One of the outcomes of the podcast is we put forward several constructive points to basically remedy all these things, and we don't have time to go through them all, but like Zoe said, a code of conduct that staff members and professional ballet dancers or company members would sign about what's expected and what's okay, what's not okay, and how to fairly report it was one of the top things that we came away from.
There seems to be a theme emerging here that there's really a lack of mental health support and awareness among the art form, among teachers and directors and folks that are leading. And there seems to be a lack of support among students and professionals. So can you kind of talk through, Zoe, what you learned from the survey related to support and awareness?
So the first point that we came up with as part of our takeaway list of suggestions was communication. So as a teacher or a mentor or a stager or a director, what you say is really important and how you say it is very important. So language and the use of language is just invaluable. How you get your point across and also how you listen and respond. So many things could be remedied, and I think a lot of people go away after an interaction and, you know, they might not even understand what's even happened, and it would just take a conversation to remedy so much of the issues that we have. Also encouraging dancers to have a voice in company. So you know, the statistics for people having a voice in company life went up slightly or improved slightly from school. And that might be because, you know, we have unions in companies, although unions, you know, we could definitely still kind of engage more with our unions in dance companies, but even just having that support would give dancers more of a voice. And so I think we need to create a culture where it is acceptable and okay for a dancer to use their voice, and it isn't deemed or seen as a sign of kind of disrespect, which it can be sometimes viewed as. The second point is mental health support for dancers from an individual trained to work with dancers. And so sometimes there are some companies, because we did the research, there are some companies that do offer mental health support. But there is sometimes a little bit of a trust issue with the dancers. If it's affiliated with the staff directly, and if things are going back to staff, like X, Y, and Z are coming to me for counseling, maybe the dancers don't want to know that. And so a kind of outside body, this is our suggestion, that is free mental health support when a dancer might need it, that really would be kind of our ideal. We think at this point in time, I think it would really give dancers a safe space to work through just the stressors that we have in life. And if it isn't affiliated to the company, then it might feel that because at the moment mental health is still stigmatized, dancers might feel if I'm going to therapy, I might be seen as weak or incapable. And while that isn't the case, you just want to take that anxiety out of the situation for dancers. So that's mental health support, an outside body. 3, a commitment to professionalism is needed from directors and staff, and a code of conduct. And this goes for stagers and choreographers, anyone who's really in the studio. And it also goes for dancers too. We need to have a culture of respect. Respect goes both ways. So it is really, really important that everyone is aware of themselves in the space and is aware of how they treat and respond to each other. It just should be a given, really. Number 4, body image, acceptance of different body shapes, sizes. Body image issues are still prevalent. And apart from attitude changes, there should be advice from a nutritionist and sports scientist. And so nutrition really is we've said it's a really, really big issue. But someone who is objective and outside, having nutrition support. Actually, I'm going to use an example here. I hope it's okay. But I've heard from a colleague and friend that in Scottish Ballet, for instance, they have an endocrinologist, they have a hormone specialist, and they have a doctor, and they have a nutritionist, and they have people that work with the dancers. And it is apparently a fantastic program because it allows the dancers to stay really balanced and healthy. It also is injury preventative, and it's kind of holistic support. So it's not just looking at their body and how it looks, it's the body and how it functions and how they're feeling within the body. And so we're talking about funding here, aren't we? But that would just be an ideal situation for all dance companies to have that kind of level of support across the board with health in general. And number 5, professional training for staff that empowers them to manage the different individuals in front of them in the studio. And so this can be a really, really difficult one because, of course, dancers, we're all very different. We're all artistic. You might say one thing to one person and it doesn't trigger another person in the same way. And so really looking at every individual and having the tools to know what language you need to use, the sensitivity training, there are so many different things that you need to be aware of as the person in front of the studio. So just everyone kind of who has that job and responsibility to be trained to deal with any eventuality.
I would just jump in and say that from the survey for professional dancers in companies and also freelance artists, 83% of them said they had no or inefficient mental health support in their jobs. So obviously there's a gap here that needs to be filled. And I actually have a little bit of new data that I just like to finish off with. We did a survey recently about mental health of dancers, not just ballet dancers, but dancers in general during the pandemic. And we see that 3/4 of them had anxiety issues, over half of them cited depression, and we even had 10% saying they'd had suicidal thoughts. That's on the negative end of the spectrum. Many others cited positive effects of the pandemic and lockdown, and particularly to do with self-reflection and time to rest and time to heal. So I think coming out of this, please, let's come out of this. I think it's really important to think, what have we learned that is positive from this enforced time of rest? What can we take forward? How can we make sure that dancers are not being overworked and burnout? Because I think there are some positive things to take away.
Is there anything that either of you would add to this conversation? I just want to give you an opportunity to.
I mean, we could go on, couldn't we, Zoe? No, I think it's really good to end with those takeaway points and the positive point about the pandemic. I think that's basically everything in a nutshell, isn't it, Zoe?
Yeah, it is. And I think as well, it was really beautiful to see all of the feedback as well that we got from it. So we were so grateful to everyone that took the survey and took the time, because it was a lengthy survey, because we didn't want it to, well, as Emma has already said, we didn't want it to skew negative, and we also didn't want it to be overly vague either. So it was a lengthy amount of time that you had to take out every day to do the survey. So we really appreciate everyone kind of involving themselves and wanting to also find a solution with us. So we hope that it makes a positive ripple effect.
We hope it does too. It is very important to Dance Data Project that we are continuing to advocate for safer, more nurturing, caring cultures within ballet and dance. And so Emma and Zoe, we are incredibly grateful for your work and your survey. And we just really appreciate you taking the time to talk through this with us, to talk through mental health. It is May, so May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we just really appreciate your work and are looking forward to getting it in front of more people.
Thanks.
Thank you.